for being with me this next hour. You are listening to Everyday Astrology with C.A. Brooks on Transcendental Tuesdays. If you're listening live, that is. We are broadcasting on 12radio.com and simulcasting on my YouTube channel, which it has the same name, Everyday Astrology with C.A. Brooks, if you're trying to find that. And that's where you go to find the archives as well. You just click that live tab and you'll find it. And hopefully we are changing the way we listen to the world. And this is November 4th, 2025. And I just want to shout out right now before we start getting carried away. Thanks to everybody who's coming into the chat room over on YouTube. I will try to keep a little bit, one of my eyeballs over there occasionally. But hey, James, always good to see you, and Renee and Leslie and Paula. And hey, guys, if you do have a comment or a question, you can post them over there. And if I can get to it, I certainly will. So thanks for joining me today. Now, on today's show, as I was putting this together, I thought, I remember last week I had said, are you ready to shift gears? And I thought, man, I should have saved that line because this is the week when we are really, really shifting gears. Absolutely changing things up because 5 important cosmic shifts are going on this week. And here again, I know I sometimes say this and, maybe it's a hyperbole. I don't know. But I've been an astrologer for 40 years. And truthfully, I have been writing for Mark's Power Peak, that week ahead. I have been writing for that since late, like December, November, December 2008, I believe. So I've been writing it for a long time. Writing, hey, what's going on every day and what do we need to watch out for? And I honestly don't remember a week in this period since 2008 when we've had 5 different fairly important things going on in the cosmos. Now, maybe I just don't remember. Maybe it's slipping my mind. But when I saw that and I'm writing all that stuff up, I thought, wow, where do you look first? Such, like look over here. Oh, wait, look over here. Now, of course, for each of us individually, some of those things are probably really going to affect us, and others maybe not so much, depending on our interests or what our particular natal chart looks like. And of course, the planets don't do anything, but they do reflect mass consciousness. And so as these things happen, that's why we pay attention, because it's fun. It's a lens through which we can look at the world and try to at least understand maybe some of our own feelings, just like maybe what's going on for us. I mean, it's very helpful to me. A different way of looking, I guess, at a psychological profile. So the things that are going on this week, and we're going to try to touch base with most of them, not spend a whole lot of time with any of them. But there again, you can check them out in Mark's Power Peak, right? You can go to that article, go to 12listen.com. And if you're not a subscriber already, go ahead and subscribe to Mark's Power Peak. It's a free newsletter that comes to your email every Saturday night. And then, throughout the week, you can just check in and say, hey, what's going on Tuesday or Wednesday or whatever. But this week, what we've got is Mars entered Sagittarius this morning. November 4th, if you're not listening live. Mars entered Sagittarius. That was very early this morning. There's a full moon in Taurus tomorrow on Wednesday. And then on Thursday, Venus is going to change signs. She's going to move into Scorpio. On Friday, Uranus is going to change signs. It's already moving retrograde and it's going to go back into Taurus. Now, this I think is an important little cycle of Uranus moving back into Taurus, and I'll tell you why when we get there. But wait for it. The week really isn't over until one more thing happens, and that is that Mercury retrogrades on Sunday, which is the 9th of November. So wow, it's like, here again, where do you look first? But before we start unwrapping all these packages, I do want to make a few announcements. And here again, I want to cycle back to Mark's Power Peak. And one of the reasons is because I'm going to go on vacation. Now, you're thinking, okay, what does that have to do with it? Well, I'm not going to do shows on November 11th or the 18th. I won't be here. So, and I'm sorry about that. I was really kind of hoping I could, get something together, but that's probably not going to happen. But everything that I would have based my talk on for those shows is in Mark's Power Peak. And truthfully, I've already got those pretty much, they're not done yet, but they will be by the time I go on vacation. So you can be assured that when you open up, your email, you're going to see those Power Peaks from Mark. And they're going to have that, that article about the week ahead. So you're gonna know what's going on the weeks, those particular weeks, the week, of November 10th and of the 17th. So I just want you, you might go, if you are a person who listens to this show regularly and you go, what, how am I going to know what's going on? Mark's Power Peak. That's how you're going to know. Please check in. And of course, Mark does his show on Mondays. I think it's 8 a.m. Pacific time. And of course, he always covers a lot of this stuff. And if you missed his show yesterday, it was great. He talked a lot about the full moon, which truthfully, I'm not going to talk so much about that one. So maybe that's a nice balance if you go listen to his show too. So I will be back. The plan is I will be back the week of Thanksgiving. So Tuesday, November 24th, we will have a brand new show, and I'll meet you here on YouTube and on 12 Radio. Okay? All right. And of course, one other thing, while I'm gone, 12listen.com will be celebrating the 12th of the month. It's always a big day for us where we have sales and discounts on calls and chats and time-based sessions. Now, even though I won't be available because hopefully I'm going to be on a beach somewhere and just, relaxing and being with my family, but I will have a specially priced time-based session. I'll make sure that that is up so that you can buy it on the 12th of the month and then use it whenever you want. And remember, you can always ask for a scheduled call on a day and a time that fits your schedule. So you can buy that on the 12th, and then I'll talk to you when I get back. Okay, so let's get at it. We can't waste even one more minute, not with Mars and Sagittarius anyway. In fact, already this morning I woke up early and I thought, that's not usual for me. I mean, I'm kind of like, I go to bed late, I get up late. I love to work into the wee hours. I mean, truly, sometimes I'm working, or doing stuff up till 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. So when I woke up early, I'm like, what? What's going on? Well, I'm thinking maybe that's Mars and Sagittarius. Now, we talked in the last week, at least, quite a bit about the sign of Sagittarius, ruled by Jupiter. It's mutable, which means that it's very flexible. It has two sides to it. It's a dual sign, but it's a fire sign. So here again, if I start talking faster and faster and faster, which my Mercury is in a fire sign, it's in Aries. I mean, I pick up on that fire and I start running with it. So there again, that's what's going on with Mars. So let's talk about Mars specifically, and then how we might expect Sagittarius to be, an influence on how we use the energy. So Mars is assertiveness. It's even aggression, obviously. It's very male energy, at least when we think of it in the traditional terms. When I say that, I mean yang energy, projecting energy outward. I'm using it very, I would say, generically and very traditionally that way. It's motivation, it's action, it's inspiration. I like to say Mars is what gets you up in the morning because it's what motivates you. It's like, here again, if I wanted to get you to do something, I'd look at your chart and I'd figure out, where's your Mars? What sign is it in? And what house? Because those are the things that motivate you. That's what gets you going. Mars. And so you might want to look at your own and really understand your own Mars. So it's our ability to take action. Now, Mars was the Roman god of war, but also he was considered to be the guardian of agriculture. Now, I remember the first time I heard that, I thought, okay, now how do those things go together? But they truly do, because if you think about agriculture, you think about that whole concept of seeds having to, it's almost a violent thing for a seed to like burst forth and push through the earth's crust in order to grow. So it's that same kind of energy. I want to take action. I'm going to use this physical energy to grow, to come up, to be this plant, this tree, whatever. So Mars is that energy. And of course, because it rules Aries, which is the sign of springtime, it makes sense. But Mars is also, when we look at relationships, I always say I look at the moon because that's emotional expression. I look at Venus because that's what we find attractive. But you look at Mars, those are the three planets I tend to look at when I'm looking at compatibility, because Mars is the sexual and physical side of a relationship, of love. So how we express and use our sexual energy is usually a function of Mars. So there again, I'm looking at somebody's chart and they're telling me something about their relationship, and maybe they've got this really sweet, sensitive moon and their Venus is very, once again, the same way. And then you look at Mars and it's in a very extroverted or a very fire energy, or maybe it's in an earth sign. Well, here again, this is what makes it fun, because we are not two-dimensional. We have all these facets of ourselves that work together. So that Venus, what do I find attractive, can be very, very different than Mars, how I express that sexual energy. So Mars is, in a sense, I think of Mars like a second ego. The sun is really how we see ourselves and the ego, but Mars is how we express our individuality and our independence, and how we separate our personalities from other people. So once again, when you look at those two together, it gives you a more comprehensive look at a particular person and the way they function. Think of Mars as your personal drive. Think of it as vitality and strength and physical energy and stamina. Now, here's another one that I'd like people to remember. Mars is the ability to recuperate, to recover following some kind of injury or an illness, or maybe just being fatigued and tired. So there again, sometimes if somebody asks me, what's going on physically in their chart, I am not a medical astrologer. But sometimes I can see, I look to that Mars for what is the ability they're really going to recover. How do they build their strength? That's it. How does this person build their strength back up? How did they get into that vitality? That's a function of Mars. So you look at, the sun and Mars together that way, you get the idea of, what is just the physical strength of this person? Or maybe even psychological. But Mars is desire. And of course, when it gets thwarted, what happens? Anger. It's that frustration and anger and agitation. Those are kind of Mars functions, because I want to push forward. I want to move forward. And if something is blocking my way, then those are some of the issues. And so almost always, if you feel angry, now, of course, you can look at your moon and say, well, what is my emotional expression? But anger tends to be a function of Mars, not getting his way, not being able to push forward. And Mars doesn't stop. He's energy. He is a planet of initiation, right? So a couple more things about Mars. On average, Mars spends about 6 weeks in a sign. And so it takes about 2.5 years for Mars to go around the complete circuit of all 12 signs. Now, that also includes that Mars will always retrograde one time during that cycle, just once. Doesn't retrograde like, 3 times a year like Mercury. It retrogrades just once during that 2.5-year cycle. So on average, it takes about 2.5 years. So if you're going, I wonder when the last time Mars was over my ascendant, or when was the last time Mars went through this particular house for me? Well, on average, it was about 2.5 years ago. All right, now I'm going to give you one quote right now. Those of you who have followed me, you have heard it many times, because it's my absolute favorite about Mars. And of course, I don't quote it every time Mars changes signs, but I like it for Mars moving into Sagittarius, because it really exemplifies the desire thing. This is by Carolyn W. Casey, who's an astrologer that wrote a book that I really like and highly recommend, Making the Gods Work for You. And this is what she says about Mars. The gods did not place desires in our psyche for them to be thwarted or disappointed, but rather as an incentive to growth. Desires are our instructional blueprints of the possible. So that's what Mars is. Look at your Mars and know those are desires that you're trying to manifest. It's not, life isn't about, the disappointment. And I'm not saying we're not going to be disappointed, but Mars is there as an instructional blueprint for what we think is possible, for what we want to be possible. Now, mix all this energy that I've been talking about, this fiery Mars, and put it in a fire sign of Sagittarius. Now do the math. It's not too difficult to figure it out. But Mars in Sag tends to be optimistic. It has irrepressible confidence in itself. It likes to move, enjoys sports. It has an affinity for horses. Now that one's kind of an odd one, but remember, Sag is the centaur. And it is funny, every once in a while I'm working on somebody, working with their chart, and, we'll talk, and they might have a Sag rising, or they have Sag in a particular place in their chart. And I find out they've got this either obvious thing about horses, or maybe it's even little hidden. They've got, oh yeah, I always wanted to be around horses or be on a ranch. And that's just one of those things I think is kind of funny that comes out astrologically. But yes, often they have an affinity for horses. Now maybe it's because they love that idea of running free across the plains with your hair blowing back. That's just an image of Mars in Sagittarius. Sagittarius rules the legs. Now, I emphasize that because here again, what's our takeaway? Unless it's inappropriate, schedule physical activity into every day at whatever level is enjoyable and doable. Get up and move. Now, maybe you can't. Maybe you had a knee replacement, or maybe something else is going on and you can't. But just know that that's what Mars wants to do. It literally wants to get up and play or do a sport. So if you are interested in those things, make sure that you're scheduling them. Now, if you can't do it on a physical level, then you might look at other ways of doing it. There again, even from the couch, maybe you can cheer on your favorite sports team. Or, and think about how many different sports there are, tennis and football and hockey. And I mean, we're not going to go through all of those, but maybe you can find something to just really be kind of even a participant in as a spectator, right? This is the time to rise and shine. And this Mars in Sagittarius, it's animated. It wants a lot of activity. And if it can't get the physical kind, then it might settle for mental or psychological. But know too that if you find yourself getting frustrated, if you find yourself just feeling agitated, that means Mars is saying, hey, I need to get up and do something. I just need to move, all right? Or I need to do something that is particularly Sagittarian. Now, similar to Gemini, Sagittarius is insatiably curious. And they love to travel, explore, and experience things. So there again, maybe that's something that Mars and Sag does for you. It's a sign also of the wounded healer. That centaur was the wounded healer. It's a sign of the student and the teacher. So maybe you're like, hey, I want to sign up for a class in England. Or maybe I just want to zoom over to Bali or India or somewhere, and to take this class, to be an intern with this person, or to follow this person. Those kinds of things are there too. And Jupiter / Sagittarius is all about higher education. But you know what? It's also about justice. So that's another manifestation that could be going on. Maybe you're involved in something legal, or maybe you want to be. Maybe you've been needing to write a contract, or you've been needing to make something official. Maybe you did need to file something with the courts. Well, maybe this is a good time to do it. All right? Because get up and go and manifest some kind of Mars / Sagittarian energy. All right? And Mars will be in Sagittarius through the 14th of December. So if you're doing that holiday shopping, you should have plenty of strength and energy to do it. Now, I will mention just a couple of the downsides, and it's pretty much what you would expect. And that is scattered energy, taking on more than we can do, running ourselves ragged. That's what can happen because we're not pacing ourselves. So here again, I know in some ways you're not going to listen to me if I say, hey, okay, take it slow and steady. But if you find yourself once again just Really feeling so scattered, just feeling like you're just stirring up trouble, or, that's what it feels psychologically, then you know what? Just take it down a notch and just think about, what is it that I'm really trying to accomplish? What is it that's really eating at me, or what's really going on for me? Now, I noticed that, James, you're saying that I'm having my Mars return. Yay! That'll be very exciting. And I'll just go to that for a minute here. Mars return is exciting because what that means is Mars is going to be at the same location it was when he was born. And think about this. This is a new 2.5 year cycle for James, or for anybody else who has Mars in Sagittarius. It's going to be a brand new cycle with Mars. Going out and getting what you want, having an adventure, learning something new. And most of the time, people really do recognize that they're turning over a new page. They're starting a new chapter. Something that has interested them, something they've wanted to do. Now it like keeps bubbling up in their consciousness, and they say, now is the time to start. So what James can do is look at where specifically does that happen in his chart. I think I know that, but in any case, look at where it's happening in your chart, because that might be where that interest is really being stirred up for him. So thanks for mentioning that and offering that, James. All right, well, we need to keep moving on. We're almost halfway through the show. We've only talked about one thing. I do want to mention, I'm just going to give you a couple of quotes. People with Mars and Sagittarius, to me, one of the most iconic people that has this particular thing is Jack Kerouac. Now, I'm not sure I'm saying his name right, but he's a famous writer. He wrote the book On the Road, and he has Mars and Sagittarius, but it's square his Virgo moon, and it's square Uranus and Pisces, but he also has a grand trine in fire in his chart that includes Mars. So the one thing, and I just call him iconic because he really was a very important, what I'd say, cultural icon for a generation. And every quote that you see, the stuff that he wrote, was so Mars in Sagittarius. And I'm sure it reflects also that square to Uranus, because just always out of the box. But one of the things he said is there was nowhere to go but everywhere. So just keep rolling under the stars. And he also said, my fault, my failure is not in the passions I have, but in the lack of control of them. You see, that I think is true too, and that's probably the reflection of that square with Uranus. That, it's just this, I don't want to say frantic energy, but that was it. Just this unbelievable need to always be on the road, to always be traveling, to always be doing something. And maybe not feeling like he was in control of some of those urges and those things. But like I said, iconic. So even if you don't know who he is, you might just want to Google him. Just look him up and see some of the things. And, it's just about, he became that image of the Rolling Stones, so to speak. Okay, the other person is Mark Twain. And he has Mars and Sag along with Sun and Venus. And its trine, once again, got a lot of extra fire here, Pluto and Aries. And of course, wrote many, many books, one of which I think the title is funny. Just because it's Mars and Sag. Following the Equator, a journey around the world. But here's one quote that I think is just, it's worth knowing. Travel is fatal to prejudice, bigotry, and narrow-mindedness. And many of our people need it sorely on these accounts. Broad, wholesome, charitable views of men and things cannot be acquired by vegetating in one little corner of the earth all one's lifetime. Now, I love that. Just that idea that travel is fatal to prejudice and bigotry and narrow-mindedness. And why that is so Sagittarian also is because, remember, Sag likes to have experiences. They like to go, in a sense, walk in somebody else's shoes. They want to know the stranger. They want to know the foreigner. So I thought, once again, just very memorable quote from Mark Twain. Okay, let's dash into Venus in Scorpio. Now, we've talked a lot about Venus. She changes signs, like every 21 days or so. So we talk about her a lot. But this is the planet of values, and we think about her with money and finances and resources and love and romance and relationships of all kinds, but especially intimate partnerships. But now she's going into Scorpio, fixed water, sensitive because it's water, but fixed, which is that perseverating and kind of stubborn energy. And so I'd say no one takes love, sex, and relationships more seriously than Venus in Scorpio. Now, listen to this and just know, I just want you to take this to heart. Venus in Scorpio wants nothing less than a complete union, a merging of body, mind, heart, and soul with the object of her desire. And that is so true. I heard it just this week from somebody. They're talking about it's not enough to just be with somebody. You don't have a relationship with somebody. They want to, like, if they could become one body, they would. That's what it is. It's this need to totally meld with another person or with whatever it is. Whatever they're into, they're really into it. Now, never mind that on planet Earth, that's probably not possible. But it's what Venus in Scorpio wants and expects and dreams of. Now, ironically, they're kind of, well, and maybe it's not ironic, but she's kind of cautious in commitment. But that's the reason why, because when she goes in, she's all in for the duration, completely and totally. Those words, till death do us part, those had to have come from the mind or the heart of Venus in Scorpio, because those are not just words. Those are not just a conventional thing that you say. It's for real. We're either together or one of us is dead. And hence the reputation for intensity and jealousy and possessiveness. Now, when I see some of those shows, I can't name them, but, some of those television shows about, somebody gone wild because of a love affair, just, crazy love, let's put it that way. Or, just that intensity of somebody breaks up with him, so they kill him. I always think of Venus and Scorpio. Now, if you've got Venus and Scorpio and you're kind of going, see, I didn't know what she's talking about, or, where is she going? I'm not trying to make it really negative, but I'm just saying these people are serious about this. And, it goes deep. It's not something that even probably psychologically they can go, oh, well, it doesn't have to be that way. It does have to be that way for them. They want the merger. They want to be completely part of this couple. And in fact, I have a greeting card. I got it years ago, and it is Venus and Scorpio for sure. And it says, if you cheat on me, of course I'll forgive you. I will also miss you. And the reason is because they're never, that is not going to be. It's like, you are not going to be in my life. This is, you are cut off forever. It doesn't mean I always say they'll forgive, but they'll never forget. Now, and of course, I know that's true of a lot of us, but just recognize this is an intensity when you've got Venus sitting in Scorpio. And think about it, Pluto, that planet of transformation, is the planet that rules Scorpio. Mars was the traditional ruler, but now we consider it to be Pluto. And so that's the other thing. When you get involved with Venus and Scorpio, or anybody with lots of Scorpio planets, expect your life to be changed. These people are agents of transformation. Being with them is cathartic. It's not just your everyday walk in the park. Now, Venus is going to be in this sign until November 30th, by the way. But here's a couple more things I want to say before we leave this topic. And that is, there was some really interesting energy that is going to go on Thursday at the time that Venus goes into Scorpio. And that is, you've heard me talk about these before, she's going to be involved in a yod, which is the finger of fate or the finger of God. On that day, Thursday, for about a 24-hour period there, we have Venus in conjunct Neptune, the planet of spirituality and dreams and illusions. In Pisces, she's going to be in conjunct. In conjuncts are where you can't quite figure that out. That energy doesn't match. She's also going to be in conjunct Uranus, the rebel, the planet of moving through limitations, that's in Taurus. So there's this, I almost want to say, magical little moment And it happens when Venus goes into Scorpio that and remember, partially this is because, see, Neptune just moved back into Pisces. It's like at that 29th degree. Uranus is moving, is sitting at 0, Gemini, but moving back into Taurus. And so there's this little, like I say, just this 24-hour period or so, maybe even less, when Venus is sitting at the very, very end of Libra and moving into Scorpio, when she's going to be in conjunct both those planets, and it's a perfect yod for a very short time. Now that catches my eye because the planet like Venus that's in the apex of that yod is the one that feels like it's being held in a position and the other two planets are in control. So I don't know exactly what that's going to mean for us, but I want you to recognize that, especially let's say you meet somebody during this time, or something's going on in a relationship during this time, because I think a lot of things could be true. It could be true that this is a relationship that will forever change your life. It's going to feel like fate. It's going to feel like, wow. And you might even meet somebody that you feel like is almost, I can't even remember his name now, Svengali or whatever, just almost like a magician or a magical person. And for good or for bad, it's like, oh my God, I just was drawn to this person, or, it just was meant to be. It's fate. But what I want you to know, you may be drawn to them and it could be fate, but it may not mean you're supposed to be with them. Those are different things. And I do think there could be this very compelling, compulsive, obsessive, almost, that's it. Just compulsive kind of energy around a person or a thing. I mean, it could be something that you see and you go, I just have to have that thing. So my advice is this: try to stay grounded. And if something seems too good to be true, or if you feel like you're in the throes of that compulsion or obsession, well, if it's too good to be true, it might be. It probably is too good to be true. And my tendency is to say, check things out with your friends. But your friends are under this energy too. Now, maybe not specifically for the same person you are, but we're all under this energy for just this short period of time. So it could be magical. It truly could. I'm not saying, don't get together with somebody that you meet this week, but I feel like there is going to be this powerful, almost manipulative energy. And we're going to feel like, oh, I just have no choices. I'm just pulled into this. I'm being vacuumed in, so to speak. So I would also say, just keep a rein, keep an eye on both your heart and your money. Okay, because this could be around finances too, where all of a sudden you think, you get taken in by something. And by the way, I did hear about somebody just recently who, it turns out it was a bot on the internet. She got taken in by somebody who was supposed to be a financial advisor, and she was going back and forth with this person and blah, blah, blah. Well, long story short, the person ended up taking $10,000 from her, and within minutes, that person had disappeared from the internet. And it turns out, it was just a bot. The whole thing was a scam. And, she said, looking at it afterwards, she goes, there were a few things that just didn't seem right. Like some of the responses, it just didn't sound quite right. And when she looked at it, she goes, I realized now it was a bot. It wasn't even a person I was dealing with. So in any case, I'm not trying to scare you, but I'm just saying, be prepared. There's some kind of magnetic energy out there, but Venus is going to feel like she's under the control a little bit of Neptune and Uranus, or of an energy that maybe she doesn't quite know how to handle. So will it be magical? Will you end up going, oh my God, that's when I met my husband. That's when I met this person. It was just incredible. Or this is when I started taking the course, or this is when something, came into my life that just changed my life forever. That could be. But I'm just saying, be careful and be aware that kind of energy around it could also blind us to what's really going on. Okay? All right. So we're going to move on to Uranus retrograding into Taurus. Now, Uranus is that planet, we were just talking about it a little bit, that it resonates within us as the need or the ability to really just free ourselves from limitations. You know, when we just want to go, okay, enough is enough. I'm going to take an adventure. I'm going to take a risk, kind of that fool energy in the tarot. I'm just going to break out of this and I'm going to take a risk. Well, so Uranus has a wonderful function in our lives. But why I think this particular retrograde into Taurus is important is because think about it. Uranus has that cycle of about 7 or 8 years when it's in a sign. So it's been in Taurus since March of 2019. Okay, so how long is that? Is that like 6 years, right? So that's when it first moved into Taurus. Now, just recently in July, you know, it's trying to move on to the next side. So it did move into Gemini. But now it's moving into a retrograde, which of course all these planets, many of them, they retrograde every year and maybe for 4 or 5 months at a time. So what's happening is at that first degree of Gemini, Uranus is now going to retrograde. So it's moving back into Taurus on Friday the 7th. And to me, retrogrades, and I'm going to say this and keep it in mind for Mercury retrograde as well. To me, those retrogrades are an opportunity to go back and take a second look, to take a third look, to look at something from a different perspective. And it's also the time to basically to get something right. You know, I mean, how often would we love to have a do-over of something? Right? So the return to Taurus is a second chance for us to get something right when it comes to areas that are associated with Taurus. And remember, Venus is the planet that rules Taurus. So some of those things we were just talking about Venus, you know, love, money, romance, but with Taurus, Venus is much more about money and resources and dedicating ourselves to something. You know, rather than relationships. Venus in Taurus, it's an earth sign, and it tends to manifest much more about how we feel about our stuff, how we attract things into our lives, how we feel about our homes and our resources and that sort of thing. So Uranus is going to get into Gemini, you know, as it finishes this retrograde in April, you know, at the end of April, basically 2026, it's going to move into Gemini for good. Then it's going to be done with Taurus. But I think for now, it's helping us wake up to something. So it's giving us the opportunity to go back and get something right or to change something. And when I mention those things that are associated with Taurus, those are things like security, safety, resources, valuables, our homes, and our traditions. Taurus is real big on traditions. We've always done it this way. We're going to continue to do it this way. And our stuff. So everything material, the things that we think mine, what belongs to me, those are very Taurus concepts. And so this is the opportunity to go back and, you know, is there something we need to look at differently? Is there something we need to do? And here again, I always look at the timing, the synchronicity of things. And as I was writing this a week or so ago, whenever it was, I heard somebody say that wealthy people tend to stay on top of maintenance of homes and vehicles and other resources and valuables rather than waiting for them to break down. And people that don't have as much money will, and here again, these are generalizations, but people who don't have that mindset or don't have as much money, they're always going to wait for something to break down and then fix it because, of course, they may have a really hard time scraping together the money for the maintenance. But I thought, you know, I mean, I guess that sounds obvious, that wealthy people tend to stay on top of maintenance and, you know, and here again, generalization. But it immediately, I went to Uranus moving back into Taurus because I thought, you know what? We create, in a sense, our own prisons. We create our own, I mean, so often, how often have we created a situation? It's like, I knew that that was a funny sound on my car. I knew that that tire didn't look right. I knew that something was going on with the water softener. You know, it's like whatever it is, but instead of checking it out, we go, okay, well, until there's water on the floor or until the car stops or until something, you know, I don't have the money to look into this right now. A repair person would be so expensive or blah, 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 blah. You get where I'm going. And it can be anything. It can be, putting off a dental appointment. It can be so many different things in our lives, but mostly I'm talking material and physical, right? So when I heard that statement, at the same time that I'm kind of musing and cogitating, whatever you want to say, I'm thinking about this Uranus going back into Taurus. I go, oh my God, that's it. I mean, those things are going together. Uranus is saying, hey, instead of building this prison for yourself in which you now feel, I mean, by the way, what do we feel like when something breaks down? And, why does this always happen to me? That kind of thing, right? Why did I not know that the insurance thing was changing or whatever? Why does this always happen to me? Now, oftentimes we are caught off guard. I'm not trying to make any of us feel guilty, but I just recognize it. I mean, in truth, so many times when something happens, I knew it. I knew it was coming. And you can either say it's just because it's common sense or it's being psychic. I don't know. But it's like, I knew it. I knew something wasn't right. Whether or not it was just a feeling of something not being right or whether it was a little more obvious. So it's like, then what we do, we kind of build these prisons of saying, well, I'm not going to worry about that. I'm not going to look at that. And then when everything comes falling down, I mean, here again, I mean, what's coming to mind is the Tower and the Tarot. Then when everything comes crashing down, we go, why does this always happen to me? How did this happen? And I also think sometimes, that's what it feels like in life. Like life goes, hey, CA, you better check out that water heater, or you better check out blah, blah, blah. And instead, I let it go. I just go, I can't hear you. And then, life says, okay, well, I'm going to pull the rug out. And now, by the way, when I say that, I don't think it works that way. I don't think anybody's punishing us or, trying to make us do things. But I just feel like, life says, okay, well, eventually you're living on planet Earth and things break down. And, if you agreed to come to planet Earth, there are some things you have to take care of, which includes your body or includes, things that you've agreed to take care of. Whether that's your family or your pet or your home or your car or whatever it is, that's part of being on planet Earth. And so there's the dog barking. Sorry about that. I know that the microphone picks that up. And in any case, he's trying to protect me right now. He sees something on the street. But in any case, I feel like that's something that Uranus is going, okay, woohoo, wake up, people. Is there something that you need to do to make yourself feel safer or more secure? Or just something you need to take care of. So don't wait for this thing to push to the limit. Just go ahead and do it now. So I thought, how wonderful is this? That Uranus is moving back into Taurus and saying, okay, I'm going to give you one more peek. I'm going to give you one more little look at this so that you can break through and eliminate any of these self-created barriers that you're putting on yourself. So just to give you some perspective, Uranus began this current retrograde at 1 Gemini on September 5th. And it is going to go back to 27 Taurus. So it's only going to be those 3 degrees. So there again, in your own charts, you might want to look at something. Is there something important, a house cusp or a planet that is sitting in those late degrees of Taurus? You may want to look at them because that might even give you a clue as to something that you could take care of, something that you need to look at again. So just do that. And then I think, let's see, is it on November 7th, I think is when it is going to quit being retrograde. I may be wrong about that, but I think that's what it is. But you know where you can find that information? In Mark's Power Peak. It's right up front. But in any case, Uranus will come out of that. Oh, I see it right here. Uranus will return to direct motion on February 3rd. It's November 7th that it goes into Taurus. And then on February 3rd, is when it will go back and the retrograde's over, and then it's going to re-enter Gemini in April. So see, spring of 2026 is going to be an exciting time. We're going to see a lot of these planets that have been retrograding back into previous signs, which include Saturn and Neptune and Uranus are all doing this. They all moved into signs in 2025 and then have retrograded back into previous signs. So spring of 2026 is going to be phenomenal for us as well, as these planets go, okay, took care of everything, locked the house, cleaned the refrigerator, whatever it was. We took care of everything, and now we're moving on to the next sign. So that's what we've got to look forward to. But I'm just thinking, this is going to be good. So Uranus backing into Taurus really is a wonderful opportunity. And I'm hoping that you will find something in your life that somehow just goes, oh yeah, I didn't take care of this. Or this was something I needed to see. Because maybe you didn't see it at all. Maybe you haven't been putting it off. You just didn't see it. So Uranus can be your friend. All right, we've got just a couple of minutes. Let's talk about Mercury retrograde. That's going to start on Sunday, November 9th, and it's going to be retrograde through November 29th. It's a relatively short period, just 3 weeks. But once again, piled on to all these other things, it's important. I mean, it's always important. And I think, when I call, in the Power Peak, I said, Mercury, our old friend, he really is our friend because he's the planet that represents how we think, how we connect the dots. He resonates with our nervous system. And how does our nervous system translate information back and forth between the brain and our body, right? So Mercury is about communications, and it will be moving retrograde for those 3 weeks. And like these other planets, it's not going to just stay in one sign. It's going to come out of Sagittarius because it's in Sagittarius at about 6 degrees, I believe. And it's going to go into Scorpio. That's what it's going to do. By the 18th, it's going to move back into Scorpio. And then by the time it gets back, it's going to go 29, 28, 27, etc. By the time it gets back to 20 Scorpio, that's going to be on November 29th. Mercury will return to forward motion. So on that 29th, it's going to be sitting at 20 Scorpio. So there again, if you're a person, you kind of pay attention, you like a little more detail, you might just want to look at those last 10 degrees of Scorpio, because that's where Mercury's going to be working. And then it's going to re-enter Sagittarius on December 11th. And then it's going to cover that area, those first 6 degrees of Sag. Now, and I love the fact that it's going to be in Sagittarius in December, because once again, with Mars and Sag and Mercury and Sag is a very hopeful, optimistic, cheerful kind of energy. So I am personally really looking forward to that. We'll love that kind of energy, just that lighthearted, life is good, or I can make life good. Let's put it that way. I can make life good through my attitudes, through my interpretations. I've been listening to a podcast that has to do with A Course in Miracles, and it's called A Touch of Heaven. And boy, I'll tell you what, without going into any of the details, what a wonderful statement, a touch of heaven. Do we bring a touch of heaven into our lives, into other people's lives? Or do we just reiterate to them how bad everything is? Somebody tells you, hey, this happened to me, and I go, oh, I can top that. Listen to what happened to me. So I love that phrase. And actually the podcast is really good too, but just that idea, a touch of heaven. Do we bring a touch of heaven? And you know what? Sagittarius is that kind of energy, wanting to bring a touch of heaven into everything. So you might kind of, if you take nothing away from the show, you might think about that, that touch of heaven. That do we reiterate to people that life can be good? That there is a positive way to view everything that's going on for us? Because here again, a lot of people go, oh, I don't want Uranus moving back into Taurus. I don't want Mercury moving back into Scorpio. Well, there can be a really good reason, something we forgot, something we need to take a look at. So it can be very positive. All right. So moving back to a touch of heaven, the full moon in Taurus, we kind of skipped over that. That's happening Wednesday. Tomorrow, if you're listening to this podcast live. But that full moon in Taurus, I'm only going to say a couple of things about it, but I think they're important. And that is, here again, the moon is our emotional expression. Everybody has feelings, right? But the way I show my feelings is going to be different than the way you show and express your feelings. And that, to me, is dependent upon where your moon is by sign and in what house. So it doesn't mean that, like I have an Aquarian moon. It doesn't mean that I don't have feelings, but I'm going to talk about it. And I'm probably going to be very detached from those feelings. So it would be easy for somebody with a moon sitting in Cancer, very sensitive Cancer, or Pisces or Scorpio to go, boy, is she a cold fish, right? I kind of laugh if people think that about me, because actually I'm a Pisces, and I can, in private, I can be quite the emotional expressor. Let's put it that way. But the Aquarius says, I need to think about this, and I express my emotions in words, not so much in feelings. And so those moons are so important. And so what I'm getting at here with this particular moon in Taurus, Taurus is earth, and it's one of the most earthiest of all of the moons. And so what happens, I think, with this particular moon is we're actually a lot more in tune with our bodies and our physical wants and needs and desires than we are with our emotions. It's like we may become, I'm not going to say fixated, but on this full moon tomorrow, it's about paying attention to our body. And so rather than even trying to figure out your emotions or think about what's going on, pay attention to things like nutrition and sleep and exercise, and or if you have any health concerns, because this full moon in Taurus wants to pay attention to its body. That's what's going on. And so just like you look at somebody who has a moon in an air sign and you go, talk, 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 but they don't feel anything. Not true. They have the feelings. They express them through that air, or they express through fire. If you've ever known anybody with a fire moon, boy, they can just blow up and then go, hey, you want to go have lunch? And I'm kind of like, no, I want to deal with this. I want to talk about it. So Taurus doesn't want to talk about it. Taurus maybe doesn't even want to blow up unless it gets really, really pushed. What it says is, I want to take care of my body. So there again, even people, as you're looking at other people, and like, let's say somebody's really upset or somebody's going through something really hard, you know what they're going to do? They're going to make a casserole. They're going to take them some food. That's how they're going to nurture them. They're not probably going to talk it out with them and say, hey, what's going on for you? They're just going to take care of their body. So think about that too. That's how they're going to express their emotions. That's how we are. But I think the overall message also for that moon says, stay grounded. Just stay grounded. Do the obvious thing, and don't analyze it or worry about it too much. Okay, well, we got to wrap this up. Next week, I won't be here, but we do have a low-key week. I'm sure you're going to love to hear that. But Jupiter is going to move retrograde. And so hopefully, please check into the Power Peak and learn all about that, and how it's about growing in very intentional directions. And also, we're going to have happy birthday to Sagittarius. The sun is going to move into your sign on November 21st. So those are some of the things that are going to be happening over the next few weeks. Check them out in Mark's Power Peak. Thanks for joining me today, to all the listeners and everybody in the chat room. And thanks to our producer, Serena, for being here today. Stay tuned on YouTube and on 1-2 Radio, because coming up next is Empowerment with Kelly Whetstone. And here's the quote of the week from Mark Twain. I have never let my schooling interfere with my education. There again, Mars in Sagittarius. This is CA signing out. I hope you have a wonderful couple weeks, and I look forward to speaking with you again the week of Thanksgiving. You can find me for personal sessions on 12listen.com, and of course you can schedule something. If you and you have been listening to Everyday Astrology with CA Brooks. So thanks for being here today, and we are streaming live on 12radio.com and on YouTube, where we are changing the way we listen to the world.